many of you heard the rock band AC/DC? They've got a song called Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap.
Yeah.
That reminds me every time I hear it of the establishment Republicans in this state. And this is my dirty deeds speech. This state and this nation were formed as constitutional republics. I always like to start going back to basics. We're a republic because the people of this state are the rulers of this state. We're a republic because we elect representatives like those here among us tonight to manage government for us in a representative capacity as public stewards. We are a constitutional republic because we as the citizens of the state passed a constitution that has one singular purpose, and that is to tell those elected stewards what they can and cannot do in Nashville. Our Constitution limits the authority and the power of government, not expands it. It also, unlike a democracy, protects the minority from the mob rule of a slight majority. It is critical that we maintain a constitutional republic in this state. The people of this state elect 99 House members. We elect 33 senators. We elect a governor, and we're supposed to elect our judges. All people holding those offices in this state are public stewards. They're not rulers. They're not kings. They don't hold power by bloodline. They are supposed to be elected. In our General Assembly, every elected official, every House member has the exact same vote and the exact same authority and stewardship as every other member of the House. No one gets 3 votes just because they've been there longer. Everybody gets 1 vote. The same is true of our Senate. It is critical to our constitutional form of government that that rule be enforced, because if it is not enforced, what happens is blocks of citizens in this state are disenfranchised. If your elected official doesn't have the right and the capacity to vote on legislation, you have no representation. You cannot tolerate such an environment in a constitutional republic. Now, it's true that our Constitution specifically gives the General Assembly the right to adopt rules. The Constitution says that that power to adopt rules is for the establishment of the procedure to be followed in the General Assembly. Now, it's critical in the adoption of rules that we understand at all times that those rules cannot suspend, alter, or abridge the representative authority that we have given to those who serve us in the General Assembly. They cannot, by making rules, take away the rights of the citizens or disenfranchise them by doing things that would subvert your right to have your House member and your senator vote on issues of significant public policy. That's something that's been a problem in this state in the past. It was a problem when Jimmy Nafee was in the General Assembly. Those of you who remember, in estimating ages, most of you do, Jimmy Nafee controlled the House in such a fashion with rules committees and subcommittees that you could frequently see legislation getting derailed, pushed aside, and defeated by a handful of legislators that were hand-picked executioners for leadership. If leadership didn't want it, that legislation almost never got to the floor for a full debate and vote. That's not a representative form of government. What that is an oligarchy. It's where a small handful determine what the law can be. And allowing those floor votes in that kind of predetermined atmosphere is not a constitutional republic that we, the people, established for our own governance. Now, many of you probably thought 4, 5, 6 years ago that when the Republicans take control, that type of shenanigans and abuse of government would go away. I hear giggles. Maybe someone was just clearing their throat. Folks, it hadn't. It's been changed a little bit. It's been fine-tuned a little bit. But the committee system still exists. Constitutionally, the committee system is an appropriate creature because it can streamline the role of the General Assembly. Properly tuned and adjusted, a just committee system would allow legislation to be considered by small groups of legislators who can hear evidence, take testimony, and serve as experts and make recommendations to the entire floor of what's good and bad. A properly run and just committee system would facilitate the passage of the best legislation for the public good of the state of Tennessee. Not just the legislation that's got the best funding from big business or some other lobbying group. However, when a committee system is used by a small number who serve as gatekeepers for the legislation that gets to the floor, we don't have a just committee system in the state of Tennessee. What we have is a tool of a small handful of oligarchical leaders to manipulate the process by which public policy of this state is established in a fashion that doesn't meet constitutional scrutiny, but more resembles an oligarchy. And so, for example, in just the last few years, what have we seen? We've seen legislation on things like Common Core, the Second Amendment, the all income tax. Did those bills really genuinely get to the floor for public debate and consideration by our elected representatives? Or was it shuttled around and manipulated with the intent and the design to, if at all, allow only limited issues to come to the floors? So what's the biggest abuse? Maybe not the biggest, but one of the primary abuses of our committee system? It's the fiscal note process. I hear laughter again. It's the fiscal note process.
Right.
You know, when a bill is introduced, Terry Lynn will tell you, Courtney will tell you, Mike will tell you, Rick will tell you, when a bill is introduced, it's assigned to a committee to address it on its merits. Judiciary, education. It's got a merits hearing. That's the expertise, is to look at the bill, determine if it's good public policy or not. What's finance's jurisdiction? To determine if we can afford it. Really? Is that why these bills, this good legislation, Common Core, Second Amendment, Hall tax, is that why they're getting killed? We can't afford it? No. And if that's not the reason, it's an abuse of the committee system, and it's a violation of our constitutional principles that restrict government abuses and that limit the ability of a small handful to rule when our Constitution mandates a republic, form of government. So this is what we've seen, and I want to share this example. I know Common Core was one, but I want to share you a specific one that involved two people sitting here tonight. Y'all heard about the open carry bill. Micah Van Husk had it. It was written and rewritten. It basically said one thing. If you can buy a gun, if you can legally own a gun, you can carry that gun openly in the state of Tennessee and you don't need a permit. Is there any aspect of that that sounds like it's going to cost the state money? No. That bill came flying through the committee system that heard it. It passed in the Senate 25-2, I understand, to Ron Ramsey's great surprise. Frankly, I don't doubt that he only voted for it on the floor because he finally realized it was a gun bill. And he couldn't afford to vote no and have it publicly recorded. But he didn't expect it. So it passed the Senate 25-2. It rolls over to the House side, and it's got a $100,000 fiscal note. Shenanigans and abuse. Why did it have a $100,000 fiscal note? Michael wanted to know. So he asked. It had a $100,000 fiscal note because the Department of Safety, Haslam's administration, being run by Mr. Gibbons, who ran against Haslam several years ago, had concluded that based on their policy, should this law pass, that they would print on the permits the word concealed. So, it cost $100,000 to print a word on a permit they're already printing words on. That makes sense. They finally admitted, and we've got the paperwork now to prove it, that the law that Micah and May were running did not require either open or concealed carry. It was silent as to the issue. That the existing law in Tennessee for handgun carry permit holders does not require open or concealed carry. It's silent on the issue. And therefore, the passage of this law would have not required any necessity to issue concealed carry permits in the state of Tennessee. What the Department of Safety decided to do was to put a false fiscal note on the bill so they could route it over to the Finance Committee so that what could happen to it? So that a dutiful puppet, Charles Sargent, acting at the instruction of Speaker Harwell or Ron Ramsey or Bill Haslam, who cares, could do what they did. They shuffled it off and killed the bill, claiming it was going to cost $100,000. And if you watch the video the night they voted, you'll get this. Representative Harrison, before he announced the vote, and after Micah had given about a 15-minute speech on why the Constitution allows open carry, Harrison announced that for purposes of voting by the Fiscal Committee on that bill that night, they would assume there was a zero fiscal note. That should have done one thing, folks. That should have automatically sent the bill forward to calendar for sitting into the floor because they lost jurisdiction over it. Instead, they voted 10-1 to kill a bill that by that time had 37 sponsors. Get that, 37 sponsors. Now, is it a just committee system that can and is regularly used to kill bills where the vote to kill the bill is significantly less than the number of sponsors on the bill? Does that make any sense to anybody here tonight? 37 sponsors on a bill. It takes 50 votes to pass it on the floor, and 10 votes in a subcommittee about 9 o'clock at night kill the bill. There's something wrong with that system. There's something seriously wrong with the system where the committees can kill bills when the votes to kill the bill in that committee are less than the number of sponsors on the bill. That is an abuse. And leadership not only allows it, but encourages it and manipulates it. So what do we have? Do we have a leadership in state government, a leadership in the General Assembly that's following the Constitution, that's following their oaths? No. As I've said, we've got an oligarchy that's manipulating a system in violation of our constitutional standards so that they can totally control what gets to the floor for a vote. So that they can totally control what Terry Lynn, Horton, and others here tonight can vote on. Is that a representative form of government? No. When our leadership in our General Assembly does that, when they did it on this bill, you know what they did? They disenfranchised, as to that one issue, 90% of the voters in the state of Tennessee. Why? Because 10 hand-picked puppets, doing what they were told, killed a bill and denied 89 others the opportunity to even have a vote. That's not a Republican form of government. And folks, we can change that in this state, and we do it the same way we took power away from Jimmy Nathie. We have to find candidates for office that will put constitutional principles ahead of partisan loyalty. We must find candidates for public office that, when pressured, will stand on their principles and hover in the right foxholes with each other, to support each other, to stand against leadership and the governor if necessary, to make sure that our Constitution is given full force and effect as they pledged when they took their oaths. We must identify legislators like Charles Sargent who will willingly compromise his constitutional oath to do what he's told by partisan leadership. We must find a way to support those who are willing to take on those battles. And we must support those like Rick, like Micah, and the others here tonight who will stand up when partisan demands violate constitutional principles. We have to have that accountability. And if we don't have people serving in office with that quality of character that they can say to leadership, you're wrong, it's not right, I won't do it, then we have to replace them with others who will. And we can do that, folks. We can do it by having meetings like this tonight, but this is not enough. You've got to reach out to those people who are seeking your support for re-election, who are doing the right thing, even if they're not in your district, and support them. You got to send the money where the money's needed. You got to be willing to make phone calls, even if it's to Far East Tennessee or Memphis. You've got to be willing to send some money to help them finance their campaigns. Because when we have a leadership that's out of control, that refuses to acknowledge and support the Constitution, a state house race isn't about a particular district or part of a county. A state house race is taking back ground that we've got to have to control the caucus enough to elect speakers and lieutenant governors that will do what the Constitution calls for rather than what big business pays them to do. And that's a hard thing to say. But folks, it's the reality. Yep. We've had Republican total control of the state of Tennessee now for 4 years. Why do we have Obamacare in the state of Tennessee? Gill over here is surrendering. You know, it's a problem, and it's a real problem, but it's one that we can overcome. Our forefathers threw off the King of England using rifles that they had over their fireplaces. We can throw off leadership that's lost its way. And all we've got to do is spend a little time and a little money finding the right people and sending them up there and then supporting them once they get there to make sure that they know we have their backs and going to send them back for a job well done. But ask those here tonight if that's not what needs to be done. And every one of them will tell you. May, for example. You know, I think that the greatest compliment Ron Ramsey gave May Beavers, the greatest compliment I've ever heard Ron Ramsey give anybody. When he removed her from Senate Judiciary, he said, I did it because she wasn't a team player. Bless his heart, he had no idea of the magnitude of the endorsement that he gave Senator Beavers when he said that. So I thank you for the little bit of extra time. Rick and Micah, I hope you don't mind that I mentioned your name or specific bills. Folks, it's a serious battle. It's more than a dinner. It's more than a $50 ticket. We got to reach deep, reach hard, and work for the next 2 months. Because for the next 2 decades, maybe more, maybe less, the battle for Tennessee government, the battle for the Constitution in the state of Tennessee, the battle for conservative principles is not in November. The total effect of the Democrat caucus in the state of Tennessee can meet at the General Assembly in a minivan at McDonald's these days. The battle for the conservative soul of this state, the battle for whether or not we're going to have constitutional governance in the state of Tennessee or an oligarchy beholden to big business is going to be the August primaries. Ronald Reagan may have been right at one time when the Republicans were in the minority and we had to embrace each other. But when the Republicans are the only game in town, that rationale makes no sense. We have to decide from within the party who honors the Constitution and who no longer does. And we have to make that determination in the voting booth with our money, with our time, loud and clear. Thank you for letting me indulge you for a little bit. Nobody got up and ran out, so I appreciate it.
John. And I'm going to underline just 2 points that he made that I think are worthy of just maybe even taking what he said into two slightly different areas. You know, we're outraged and appropriately so across this country. I think I saw a poll today, 87% of Americans are in the camp with what Barack Obama did in trading a traitor to release 5 terrorists is absolutely illegal. It is unconstitutional. Even Democrats, even Chris Matthews and MSNBC are acknowledging that what he did was wrong and illegal. We decry lawlessness when Barack Obama does it. We attack those who ignore the Constitution and ignore the law when it happens in Washington, but it is happening, as John points out, right here in Tennessee, and it is Republicans doing it, and we have an obligation to future generations to speak up as loudly, as directly when Republicans break the law as when Democrats do it.